All right, if you thought I was done yapping about double exposure, I hate to tell you that, well, you're still wrong. I still have so much more to yap about, and this one, I'm going to try to not make this 8 minutes long, honestly. That last one was a little too much even for me, but I am going to yap for a bit. If you are just now finding me, hello, my name is Dan Pixel. I am a Let's Play streamer. I am a performing artist, a professional of about 10 years, and I am also an arts marketing professional. My most focused skill set is in narrative deconstruction and analysis, and I think this is really good to apply to video games, as video games are oftentimes left out of consideration when talking about art forms. Today we're going to be talking about all 5 Life is Strange games and something that they all share in common. One thing that I've always appreciated very much about this anthology is that every single game is its own thematic arc with its own narrative form. This is deliberately intentional. No Life is Strange game is ever meant to feel like another Life is Strange game. This remains true whether the owner of the intellectual property was Don't Nod or if it is Deck 9. Even dating back to the original conception when they moved on to their second game, the creators of Don't Nod were very specific that they wanted this. But without getting too deep into the weeds on what was the originator's intentions, let's talk about the narrative forms of each one and what their thematic purpose is. So let's start off with the original Life is Strange, right? When it first came out, both creators of Don't Nod were very, very specific that they thought that this was a story about friendship. In an interview with the magazine Endgamer in October 2014, Michelle Koch said the following, "But it is mostly still a friendship story before everything. It is a friendship story and a mystery." And while that certainly may have been the original intention, it certainly hasn't been the applicable result. My personal opinion at this point is that the very first Life is Strange is not just a love story, but it is told in the manner of an epic. While a lot of its early portions do contain a lot of different kinds of wistful nostalgia, over the course of the game, the stakes are constantly raising in almost an exponential arc, building to a fever pitch in which it finally explodes when the stakes themselves are life and death itself, not just for the protagonists, but for everything they know and possibly the world that they know. This is something more common in fantasy heroic arcs than anything else, which is why I think Life is Strange is mostly embodied by the style of epic storytelling. I do also want to point out before I move on that the quote that I said from Michelle Koch earlier was brought up in this interview because the interviewer asked both him and Maurice, his companion, whether or not they thought any of the women in the original Life is Strange game, Rachel, Chloe, or Max, had any romantic relationships between them, to which basically they implied that there was ambiguity but denied that that was the point. As you know by now, that didn't work out for them exactly, did it? Anyway, now we're going to move on to Life is Strange 2, which has a very different theme and storytelling method. Life is Strange 2 does focus on a relationship between two people, but it is more about a relationship between family, and more specifically is about taking care of family. In terms of technical access of this, you are not controlling the character who is empowered, but you are playing a character who has to look after the empowered character. They are young and not capable of really knowing how to parse their new abilities themselves, and they need you to help do it for them, while also remembering that they are an individual in and of themselves. Whereas if you wanted Max to make a decision and use her powers to affect that, you could. However, as Sean, you can try to influence Daniel, but Daniel has his own autonomy. As a second layer, this story was crafted as more of a road trip kind of long-form adventure. One of the first ways you notice this, and one of the ways that it differs from just about every other Life is Strange game, is that a significant amount of time passes between each chapter. Moreover, its ending and the choices you make to get there do not build up to the same kind of fever pitch, although they do heighten dramatically. They're not building up to the same kind of final conflict. The ending of Life is Strange 2 embodies this kind of complex mass of swirling questions that you would usually see in kind of a more art film than anything else. All right, now we're moving on to the Deck 9 games. Next up, we have Before the Storm. Before the Storm is a very different game in some regards, but mostly that comes down to it being a prequel. One of the pitfalls of a prequel is that you are always destined to end up at a certain place when you finish. It's one of the reasons that the Star Wars prequels, no matter how much you like different parts of them, sometimes feel like the pacing is a little bit off in some places because you can't get around where you need to end up in Vader's story. However, because Rachel Amber was basically a character left to the player's imagination in the original one, Deck 9 had a lot of freedom with what they could do with her. All they knew is where they needed her to end up. Otherwise, she was a complete unknown. Meanwhile, we did know where Chloe had to end up, and we did know some of her own trauma, but we finally got to see it from her perspective, making it one of the most interesting prequel series that I've ever seen because it does not deal with the main character before they're the main character. Additionally, thematically, I would say that this game is about passion. Specifically, it is a romantic passion, and that is very unambiguous. And certainly you can say, like, you can make the choices that where Rachel and Chloe aren't dating, but I think when you play through it, it's the feeling you get no matter what. This was part of a move by Deck 9 to move towards more explicit queer representation. Additionally, Steph was an out lesbian, something that didn't really exist in the series up to this point. Even in Life is Strange 2, which was more explicitly queer than Life is Strange 1, Sean's sexuality is sort of left up into whatever the player chooses to do with it, and meanwhile, Finn and Cassidy do feel somewhat like player-sexual characters. As opposed to its two predecessors, Before the Storm actually feels like the closest thing in the Life is Strange series to a dating sim rather than an adventure. But that's because it's more about context on the whole than anything else. Deck 9's second game, True Colors, is another step in a different direction. In terms of style, True Colors is unique as that it is the one that feels the most like a slice of life. We follow Alex as she is uprooted and gets to know a new place, whereas everyone else had been somewhat established in their beginning zones. If you call it an isekai, I'm going to slap you. Moreover, it was about the process of building your relationships with new people who you never interacted with before. There was very little prior history to draw upon as there were in several of the other ones, pre-established relationships, other than a brief one with Gabe for one chapter. Thematically, True Colors is about belonging. It is the thing that Alex is searching for and is essentially the thing she eventually finds, no matter which answer you choose. The thing that I love about that particular choice is how well it functions in the anthology as a whole, given that one of the hallmarks of the Life is Strange series to that point had been the final awful trolley choice you would always have to face. By telling you that it was going to be all right and it was about what you wanted to make of your life, it both encourages you to take steps forward but also find satisfaction in that which is. And that torturing yourself for your mistakes isn't always necessarily the right way forward. I do chuckle at that because that now brings me to Double Exposure. The thing that I find most interesting about Double Exposure is that what you feel for most of the game, the murder mystery part of it, is not actually what the style of it is when you finish it. What it actually feels like is the first part of a two-parter or the first chapter into a new adventure. And I know I keep teasing that I'm going to talk about it. I really will, because I have a lot of opinions about that. However, what I want to talk about today is the thematic point of Double Exposure, which took me a long while to come up with the correct word for. So far, we've got love, family, passion, and belonging. I needed one word to try and sum up this entire game. What is the phrase that completely sums up the storytelling journey that is happening before the player? That answer is absolution. Max's guilt being such a driving force for any of the action in this game is such a beautiful narrative choice because it, again, forces you to context that which has happened before and what has been with where you are. I would probably argue that the only game in this anthology that doesn't do that is Life is Strange 2, but even then, you can't escape drawing on the prior game just because it has the same title. Understanding that you cannot get away from that association, you may as well use it in your favor. You, the player, do not need to buy into this idea that Max has guilt because you know she has guilt. Moreover than anything else, it's called absolution because it's about letting that guilt go and moving forward with your life. This has a unique combination with its overall style, right? I said first chapter rather than murder mystery, which, by the way, it shares in common with its originator that both of them wanted to be a murder mystery and then became something completely different. But it does seem to be that the statement they want to make is that this is the step that we're going forward with Life is Strange games, acting as a statement piece for the company as well as the franchise. I do have thoughts about that, and that will be included in a later video, but overall, these are generally my thoughts on themes. Please let me know what you think in the comments, and please, I don't want to talk about Chloe in this video. I will have a video talking about Chloe, I promise you.